Interestingly, it seems like the word progress has been kind of an elusive word because there's been times where I've been on what was formerly known as Twitter, and I just said that the 90s was a great time, because it was, from my point of view. And I remember somebody just popped up and said, no, it was terrible, the 90s. And they started listing all the things about the 90s that were terrible. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, I mean, you can do that with anything at any point. Anything can be stripped down to two opposing forces that meet somewhere that are both true and are actually one entire process. That is like the main thesis of everything that I've learned, really. And my notion that the 90s were awesome is no different. Because for me, and in my bubble, my childhood, and what I had going on in the 90s, was about as close to a utopia as you can possibly get. I mean, really. Down in Florida, nice little neighborhood, nice little street, group of friends, maybe 15 of us, played basketball all the time, went to school, and there was absolutely no discernible darkness. I mean, there were weird characters, but so far as I was concerned, the vast suffering that was going on in the world at the exact same moment may as well have not existed. So when somebody says a word like progress, it's easy to be like, yes, that's true on one hand, but on the other, you can also see how it's true that some areas the opposite has happened, which is strange in some circumstances, because to any observer, to anybody looking, it's pretty clear to see that when it comes to technology, especially, there's kind of been a linear situation developing for quite some time now, because of course that's exactly how something like that would even work in theory. That there is not going to be any way to go from starting a fire to, launching rockets. That there's just not going to be any kind of leap that's going to make that happen in a lifetime, or even within decades. Like that's going to take a long time, and a lot of the developments along the way are going to be complete accidents. A lot of the time shit happens when somebody is looking for one thing and ends up finding another thing, and they're like, oh shit, and bam, there it is. It really is like unlocking things that are available according to reality in the universe. It's less like progress, and it's more like unlocking layers that are there according to how reality exists, but we just don't know about it yet. That's really what it looks more like. And once the knowledge, or whatever, the understanding, the comprehension has proliferated, it's out of the bottle, and it can kind of sink in as common knowledge. And once it's common knowledge, that becomes the new platform that you can kind of base the next layer off of. Because that's just not at all a subjective interpretation. It's just what has happened so far. So we are all standing right now on an unknown level, because we don't really know what to call it or what number to give it. But there are certainly, based off of our experience so far, more levels that we don't know what to call them. Maybe we'll give them a name in retrospect, in a similar way that we call certain periods the Dark Ages or the Age of Exploration. or the 100 Years' War, you know, in the 5th year of the war, they were not saying to themselves, between the British and the French, you know, let's see this thing through for 95 more years. You know, it's just not how it works. It's not how reality works. So it's interesting how, on the one hand, it's a strange, one of the strangest pairs of opposites that has especially come to fruition in the last few decades is the idea of postmodernism, plus the idea that only one thing can be etched into time. Like, postmodernism says, you know, that there's infinite interpretations for reality, which is true, but there's also an infinite number of possible things that could happen, but there's only one thing that does happen, and there is one best interpretation depending on the context of the person. Because as events unfold, depending on what you're trying to do, certain interpretations are more valuable than others. And that's just that there's always a best interpretation that most fits your situation / context / what you know. And if we knew more, we would have a different interpretation. Like, you know, there was a time when burning wood was the most common way to release energy, you know? And if you were a person back then, thousands of years ago, you might look at a tree and say a tree is made of wood. Because that's where all the wood is coming from. But it leaves out all the rest of it. They had no idea what it was doing in terms of oxygen and carbon dioxide. They had no idea that most of what a tree is comes from the atmosphere, not the soil. That the soil gives it some of its constitution, but most of what a tree is comes from the atmosphere. It's the strangest thing, but it is some combination of those things. And photosynthesis ends up being a way for Earth to grab more of what the sun is doing, and it converts it into oxygen, which is exactly what we need. And knowing that helps. There are more things to know, and I'm always gonna, no matter how much we know, there's always more. Always more. More contexts, more ways in which things fit together. Because even history, learning about the history of humanity, of the planet, of whatever, feels more like memory. You know, it feels more like amnesia that I have to and want to rediscover or whatever, you know. And sometimes you can be learning history about one area that appears unrelated to other areas, but it directly connects, and when you see it, it's just like this feeling, you know, where it just feels like things sync up just slightly more, and you get what's going on just that much more. That there's a huge difference between watching events unfold and watching events unfold knowing what happened before that. So when I think of progress, I try to think of it on the largest scale possible, plus what I would like to see out of the world, to be honest. Because without those two things, it's just a mishmash of, you know, layers of true things that may or may not fit together, that can be argued as progress or regression. Because there are so many true things at any given point, and there are so many possibilities and so many different interpretations, you have to at least constrain yourself in some way. And at the same time, look at it on as large a scale as possible. So when I think of progress, for me, what I would like to see is everybody as wealthy as possible. If everybody was as wealthy as possible, which is such a idealistic, simplistic way of saying it, it actually gets to a lot of what people point at as regression. And as one says that, I also realize at the same time there are people who have no interest in anything remotely like that, who would rather like stay, as part of the woods. Stay simple, which I get. Okay. So, what do you do in that scenario? What do you consider progress in that situation? Because time will stand still. Money, really, in my mind, has to enter the equation at some point. Money. And I don't mean that like in a greedy way, but people often say, healthcare is a right and housing is a right, but working should be a right too. For some reason, that one doesn't get as much juice. But if people would just say working is a right, then that would help the other ones. I don't know why we go straight for the thing at the far end, that's usually a fruit of labor, and just skip the labor part. Like why? Because labor, a person participating in labor, does all those things. If you plug a person into the labor market and they're enacting their particular speciality, it may be somebody who contributes in making homes and providing healthcare. Imagine a place that had massive swaths of people who didn't work, but who were at the same time saying healthcare is a right, and housing is a right, and XYZ is a right, when the actual human beings who bring those things to life aren't participating. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's regression for humans to flag out of labor without a replacement. That's just regression. If there's something there to replace it, then you could definitely consider that progress. Because if you took that to its extreme and you had a territory, say the United States, where nobody worked, completely voluntary, you could work if you wanted to, you could go down to the hospital and give them your hands, and chat it up and have a good old time saving lives, or not. If you're in that situation and you had machine labor who was 24/7, took up a lot of energy, yes, took up a lot of data, yes, but filled in for people, then that is remarkable progress. That's remarkable progress. That seems to be where we're going. If you look at what we've been doing so far, especially with the situation of labor, that has been at the forefront of human endeavor for quite some time now. And strangely, when the plague hit, that was kind of the beginning of the end of serfdom, because it killed half the population, dude, especially in Europe. And suddenly there was a scarcity of labor, and you couldn't just divide a person up. All of a sudden, like these former serfs had negotiating power; they could get paid, and it just transformed everything. It's one of those examples of this strange event that had unexpected results that were ultimately good. Which is, it just goes to show you just don't quite know where things are going to go, And in the United States, you have a place where it's a giant market, where it's kind of like, the Wild West, where there's all kinds of financial engineering and financial packages and financial ideas that are birthed here. All sorts of ways of packaging labor, loans, all types of ways of structuring an economy that are tested out. And you end up with labor unions. Like somebody figured out that if you organize the labor of a place, it gives them bargaining power, And over time, you can see progress. There's obviously been progress. And you can see a clear direction. I mean, once we started replacing or amplifying human labor with machines, the idea entered mind that this could even be done and taken to its logical extreme. But labor is also power. It's also power. And as of now, we don't have, machines that can fully adopt human labor. And it just seems to me a better situation to have people in the system in that way, but, getting paid well for it. And honestly, it always pulls from somewhere too, because the wealthier a place gets, the more expensive things get there. It's if everybody here had $1 million in their bank account, and that was like our zero, everybody had $1 million, then everything would cost more, because vendors and anybody who sells anything would be able to test out increasing their prices, and somebody would pay it. As long as somebody pays it, the price will stay the same. So the wealthier a place gets, the more expensive things get, because there's more people who are willing to pay for it. So it slowly expands the divide between the wealthy and the unwealthy, because once you reach a critical mass of wealth, like there's a massive middle class and a pretty massive super wealthy class, you can slowly start raising prices because people will pay it, and it just further and further leaves behind people who are at the beginning. And that's a difficult situation, because it's like an organism. It's like a growing thing that not people aren't necessarily planning like that. And you end up in a situation where the prices go up, but people pay it. As long as somebody pays it, it will continue to go up. And then on the other end of it, for the people that own assets, who own houses, they want the price to go up, obviously. It's considered a bad economy or a bad sign or a negative occurrence if their house price starts to go down. So you have like these massive groups who are sets of opposing forces. And even as the price for assets go up, people are still paying for it, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to keep going up if people weren't paying for it still. Things don't just go up and up and up in price without people buying it. It's like gas. Gas is so mandatory that you can keep jacking up the price, and people will have to pay for it. Will have to figure out a way, And in a place like the United States, where we have so much momentum and we are so insanely wealthy, especially some companies, they're worth like multiple trillions of dollars. It's like we have a lot of inertia in the US. And at some point, in my opinion, progress is going to change the way it looks, because for a while now, and completely necessarily so. Like I'm not for or against this. I'm just observing. For the last while now, progress has been marked by expansion, growth, and profits, which is, perfectly natural. But at some point, when this place is saturated enough with money and wealth, it's going to switch to how well do you take care of your employees. At some point, if you have multiple companies that are worth trillions of dollars and the employees are interchangeable and their jobs are extremely secure and it has revenue that is all but guaranteed because it involves things that people absolutely need, then the thing that makes you prestigious, it isn't so much your massive revenue, it's the quality of your employees. Like NVIDIA, I think like 80% of their employees are millionaires. And even me just saying that out loud, automatically, even in myself, it flicks this kind of switch that says like, well, they must be a good company, they're clearly doing something right. They have all those employees making all that money, yet they're still one of the top wealthiest companies on earth. At some point, as labor diminishes as well, and we enter this sort of transition that will take a while to play out, like the quality of your employment package is going to be the thing, because profits will still come, even if you have to take a hit with profits. Like profitability for a lot of places is no longer a question of like, survival. You're not going anywhere. You can get loans for whatever you want, and technology is becoming so specialized that it not just anybody can make it. Like some of these very low nanochip or nanobit chips, only a few places, if not one place, can make it, and some of the equipment used has to come from certain places. So it's like an international monopoly, but it has strategic implications. So it ends up oddly having to be that way. Like it needs to be that way because AI is in the equation and just raw computing power. It's like the literal cutting edge of the future unfolding. But it has to do with these tech companies as well, and large tech companies that can employ thousands of people, and that also have subsidiaries and partners who are also dependent on large tech companies will have a revenue stream that's all but guaranteed. Especially when you enter a situation where you're making everything smart. By making everything smart, it's kind of like a brilliant duplication of everything that already exists, but you smartify it. So for every toilet that exists in the United States, you can sell a smart toilet and have a massive market for every toilet that's ever been sold. Only you make it smart. So suddenly it opens up markets again simply by appliances and things being smart and hooked up to the internet. You can sell smart coffee makers, smart toasters, smart refrigerators, smart cars. You completely duplicate the market by this whole smart phenomenon. And that's not only in the United States, that has potential internationally as well. So, having just a regular toilet is going to be seen as old. It's not going to be able to be part of your health care to assess you with your toilet at home with information that your doctor has access to. Because this is kind of the envisioned future where things are tethered together and made they're made in a way that is far more streamlined and gathers far more information and makes it much easier to get a picture of one's health and work on one's health just by living in their house, and making the nature of doctors' visits different, and even having doctors and analysts who are machines. We are going to machinify everything and smartify everything. It's technically going to be like another form and layer of consciousness, and it's not a theory on whether or not that's going to happen. It's already going on, and it doesn't have to be a policy because the public will want it. It's just, not everybody, but it's going to sweep through. And over time, as the United States builds, gets more and more wealthy, and we find ourselves in a position where we are the 1% of the 1% of the 1% as a country, the thing companies will have as one of their largest assets won't just be their revenue, it will be the way they deal with their employees and their customers at that. That's what prestige will come from. How well off are your employees, though, will be the question. Yes, we're profits are up by 10% this year, but how well off are your employees? That's going to be the next question, if not even the first question, because the genius is in balancing those two. If you can balance those things, if you can continue to expand revenue as well as take care of your employees and customers, then you have the holy trinity of a business. Like, truly take care of them and actually do good by them. And in the end, it helps a company if it's public knowledge that they take care of their employees. These social elements play a role in whether or not a company is ascendant, truly ascendant. If you treat your employees like shit, but you make a shitload of money, it's like, okay, great, but you're clearly not as good as you can be. Yes, you make it, and it ends up being this kind of feedback loop. You make good products, you do well, you're a well-run company, you take care of your employees, but you also make a shitload of money. Like, that's like the thing. That is progress. The evolution of a business that goes from an institution that benefits the ones who created it, which is natural, that should happen, of course, that should be a starting point. And over time, it grows into a stronger, more intelligent organism. And as that happens, it spreads. It's infectious. And the strength of these companies become unassailable because they are filled with people who support it as more than something that they just make money from. They support it as a way of life, as a philosophy, as a way of thinking. If you truly want to influence people, treat them well. Like, why don't you try that? Like, it is so much better to actually take care of people than it is to try to tell them what to do, or try to secretly influence them behind the scenes, or to treat them like they're stupid, or to try to be some kind of lord, try to be some sort of powerful dominion that has to work in the background or takes advantage of its position. That is true progress. A company who is so profitable and does so well that it can loop it back around into its employees and its customers. And I promise you, if you're in such a loop, you will be unstoppable. Like, how is somebody supposed to compete with a company who has those three pillars thriving,